On a beautiful day in the 37th year of the Meiji era, this is Sugimoto. He was currently participating in the war between Russia and Japan with his buddy. When the commander gave the order, Moto and his comrades charged toward the enemy base. The Russian soldiers responded with gunfire and bombs. Many of Moto's comrades fell. Amid the rain of bullets, Moto was also hit. But he defied death and charged straight into the Russian formation. Moto began to fight fiercely, killing while shouting, "I am immortal Moto." Alone, he turned bodies into mountains. One would think that with such achievements, he would receive a medal after the war. But when the war ended, Moto had to go pan for gold, scraping together coins in Hokkaido. Just because he couldn't stand the sight of the commander and killed him, or maybe it was because he wore a rag tied around his neck. Knowing Moto needed money, a nearby drunken uncle told him a story. Of course, it was related to gold. Long ago, on the banks of a river in Hokkaido, there were gold nuggets the size of beans. People there could collect up to 30 monmi per day. During that time, some Ainu people stored tons of gold to prepare to fight back against the Japanese forces, because even after the Meiji Restoration, those troops still oppressed the people. Then a bandit appeared. He killed all the Ainu and took the gold. Hunted by the police, he had to hide the gold. But he was caught before he could tell anyone the location. He was imprisoned in a Bashiri prison, awaiting execution. He wanted to reveal the hiding place to his comrades outside. But he didn't write a letter, knowing that the guards would steal it. There was a particularly cruel guard who cut a thief's Achilles tendon to prevent him from escaping. In that situation, the bandit came up with an idea. Tattoos. He tattooed the code to the gold's location onto the bodies of other death row inmates. The code could only be deciphered by his comrade. However, a few guards learned about the plan, so he sent some tattooed inmates out to search for the gold. But he didn't expect those inmates to kill all the guards and escape. That's where the story ended, because all the prisoners escaped, and no one knew where the gold was. After telling the story, the uncle fell asleep on the spot. Moto panned for gold for a while, then went to warm his hands. He recalled the Russo-Japanese War. At the time, Moto's friend had invited him to pan for gold when the war ended. The friend had a wife with poor eyesight who needed treatment and a child to take care of. But it seemed he would never get to see them again. Later, Moto's friend was killed. He begged Moto to take care of his wife and child. Snapping out of the memory, Moto found the uncle sober and pointing a gun at him, saying he had revealed too much. But this was no ordinary man, and this was the immortal Moto. Moto calmly disarmed him. The uncle fled in fear. At first, Moto hadn't believed the story, but now he did. Moto began carrying his rifle to go find the old man. To his surprise, when he found the man, he was already a dried-up corpse. Upon examining him, Moto saw that the man had been attacked by a bear. Moto took off the man's shirt, and sure enough, there was a tattoo with a code. Overjoyed like he had found gold, well, in truth, Moto would find gold. He hurried to hide the old man's body before the bear returned. Unfortunately, the bear found Moto. His gun jammed, so Moto ran to a cliff. As the bear charged, an arrow shot it down. The shooter was an Ainu girl. After the bear died, the girl began removing the meat around the poisoned arrow. When Moto told her the old man had been attacked, the girl was surprised. This type of bear had just come out of hibernation and wasn't able to eat yet. Only one kind hunted in winter. The Matakarap, a brown bear. They didn't hibernate and were extremely aggressive. The girl asked what Moto planned to do with the body. He said he would take it to a nearby village. The girl thought that was unwise, since this type of bear would pursue anyone who stole its food. But now, Moto couldn't give up the treasure right in front of him, and he also couldn't tell the girl about it. The girl suggested that Moto fight the Matakarap. As a soldier, Moto wasn't afraid of fighting, but even though he was skilled in combat, he still needed someone experienced in killing bears to support him. Seeing that this Ainu girl was quite honest and genuine, Moto decided to reveal the secret of the gold to her. The girl agreed to help Moto, because among the Ainu who were killed was her father. At night, the two of them lit a fire and used the corpse to lure the bear. Upon examining the corpse, the Ainu girl realized that the old man had no intention of sharing the gold with anyone. He had killed and skinned the other prisoners. Now Moto thought of skinning the old man, but it was too late. The bear would arrive before they could finish. They needed to light fires around the area to increase visibility during the night. And when morning came, they would have the advantage. While Moto was out gathering firewood, he encountered the brown bear and immediately punched it. The girl, hearing Moto's voice, came to support him, but it was too dark for her to see anything to shoot. Moto clung to the bear's underside so that it couldn't attack him. The moment the girl had a clear line of sight, she fired at the bear, but Moto, who was underneath, stabbed it with a knife, making it run off. When Moto separated from the bear, it immediately turned its attention to attacking the girl. It was so fast that she couldn't draw her arrow in time. Fortunately, a white wolf leapt out and fought the bear in her place. The girl then pointed out the direction of the bear's heart to Moto. He aimed and fired, but the bullet couldn't pierce its thick skin. The bear charged at Moto, who shouted, "I'm immortal." Just before letting the bear impale itself on the knife mounted on the tip of his rifle, killing it, the girl acknowledged Moto's bravery and introduced herself as a Serpa. While they were dealing with the bear, a Serpa revealed that her father had been killed during the transport of the gold. Their bodies had been chopped up and fed to animals. She still didn't know who had killed her father. Moto proposed that they search for the gold together. He only needed a small amount to help the wife of a dead friend. A Serpa didn't think Moto would go so far as to hunt down and skin the other escaped prisoners. In Ainu belief, a bear that kills and eats people becomes an evil god and is banished to hell, and she didn't want to kill people either. But Moto laughed and said that if killing people meant going to hell, then he must have a business class seat straight down. Moto then took out his knife and began skinning the old prisoner's body. He told the Serpa that the man who had killed her father was still inside the prison. The government wouldn't execute any of the prisoners until they found the location of the gold. Once they found the gold, the prisoners would no longer be needed. Therefore, by helping him search for the gold, she would also be getting revenge for her father. They would work together in a win-win partnership. He would do the killing, and she would help him with her intelligence. Moto needed money. A Serpa needed revenge, different goals, but the same path. If they cooperated, no one would be able to stand in their way. The next morning, Moto and a Serpa set up squirrel traps. According to a Serpa, squirrel meat was delicious. Since the gold was still in Hokkaido, the escaped prisoners were likely still in the area too. So Moto would start hunting them. They wouldn't survive long in the mountains, so they would probably gather in the larger towns. He would start from there. The major cities in Hokkaido included Sapporo, Hakodate, Asahikawa, and the one they were currently in, Otaru. Once in the city, Moto went to a hot spring bathhouse. While bathing, he asked the people around him if they'd seen anyone with strange tattoos. Though he called himself the Immortal Demon, Moto's body was covered in scars from all his battles. Meanwhile, a Serpa was going around asking questions in a brothel. The brothel owner realized she was Ainu and planned to sell her off. She drew her knife and gave him a black eye. Just as he was about to retaliate, Moto showed up, punched him in the throat to shut him up, and put him in a chokehold for interrogation. The brothel owner said he hadn't seen any customers with those kinds of tattoos, but others had come asking about them. The two of them continued questioning people in the area. When they realized someone was tailing them, they led him into the forest to expose him. The man let his guard down and got caught in a trap that a Serpa had set. Once captured, Moto interrogated him about the whereabouts of the other prisoners. The man didn't even know. He said that when they were on the move together, the group suddenly turned on each other. He was lucky to escape and had no idea where the rest were. Since there was no useful information, Moto got to work. He took out his gun and knife. But a Serpa returned and said if he killed the man, their cooperation would end. Moto then tied the prisoner up so that a Serpa could draw the tattoo. While she was sketching, she asked the man what the leader was like. He barely had time to say Naparabo before a bullet went straight through his head. Moto grabbed a Serpa and pulled her into hiding. The drawing was now stained with blood. A Serpa quickly scattered the surrounding bushes to create smoke and obscure the sniper's aim, then fled with Moto. The sniper tracked their footsteps to follow them. He stepped into one of a Serpa's traps and lost his gun. Moto charged out to fight him. But this guy wasn't an amateur. He easily snatched Moto's gun and revealed his identity. From the number on his shoulder, Moto realized he belonged to the 7th Division of Hokkaido, the strongest unit in the military. Moto didn't want trouble with this man, so he introduced himself. Of course, the soldier wasn't going to let anyone connected to the gold off the hook. He lunged at Moto with a knife, but Moto flipped him over and pinned him down. A Serpa arrived just in time to stop Moto from killing him. The soldier managed to escape and ran off. Moto swung his rifle and hit him in the head, making him stumble into the river. Moto explained that if the guy survived, his division would come after both of them. He didn't want to kill, but anyone who tried to kill him, he'd kill them first. Kill or be killed, that's how he survived on the battlefield. Back at camp, a Serpa had hunted 3 squirrels and planned to make minced squirrel meat. After skinning them, she gave Moto some fresh squirrel brain to try. He found it a bit gross, but still ate it. They minced the meat together. Then a Serpa rolled it into balls, added some spices, and cooked it. Moto found the dish surprisingly delicious. As for the soldier, he was lucky. His comrades found him and saved his life. The next day, Moto captured another escaped prisoner using the same old trick. He interrogated the man about how many had escaped. It seemed people here hated the Ainu just like the Jews. The prisoner insulted a Serpa, which irritated Moto, but a Serpa told him to let it go. She spotted a rabbit nearby, so the two of them went hunting. Once they were out of sight, the prisoner pulled out a razor blade he'd hidden in his mouth. His name was Shira, known as a master escape artist. Just as a Serpa caught the rabbit, Shira escaped. Moto told her to return to camp while he gave chase. Shira ran down a cliff. Moto threatened to shoot him, but Shira wasn't afraid. At that moment, there was a loud cracking sound like a gunshot. A Serpa recognized it as the sound of trees splitting. It was the cold. A chilling wind had dropped the temperature below -30 degrees C, causing the frozen water in the trees to expand and crack them open. While chasing Shira, both he and Moto fell into a freezing lake. The icy water made them feel cold to their bones. They had just about 10 minutes to warm up before death. Shira, slightly unhinged, started sharpening a large stick. Moto needed gunpowder from his bullets to start a fire, but they had all fallen into the river. Unwilling to die from the cold, he dove back into the water to retrieve a bullet. But Shira wasn't foolish. He made a deal. Moto had to promise to let him live in exchange for help. When Moto agreed, Shira coughed up a bullet he'd hidden in his throat. The two men started a fire together. Through their conversation, Moto learned there were 24 escaped prisoners in total. As for Naparabo's friend, Shira didn't know. The only person who might know was the leader of the prison break. When they killed the guards, that man stole a sword and cut them down one by one. He was a samurai from the Bakufu era to Shizo. Shira revealed that Naparabo had instructed him and the other prisoners to go to Otaru. Before they parted ways, Moto advised Shira to give up on the gold, since even the military's strongest division was hunting it. Moto returned to camp as night fell. A Serpa had cooked the rabbit for him. The taste was great, but something was missing, so he added some miso. A Serpa mistook it for poop and backed away in disgust. Watching Moto enjoy it so much, a Serpa looked visibly disappointed. The next day, a Serpa led Moto to hunt a bear. She found a bear den and told Moto to crawl in to lure it out. According to her father, a bear won't attack someone brave enough to enter its den. Moto didn't like the idea and suggested hunting something else. While walking, a Serpa noticed something glinting on a mountain. Moto recognized it as a scope. He quickly grabbed a Serpa and ran. A 4-man team was chasing them using skis. Moto hid in the grass to conceal their tracks, knowing they couldn't outrun them. He gave a Serpa the map and the two split up. Losing the trail, the team sent one man to search for a Serpa, while the other 3 went after Moto. One of them seemed quite clever, following the tracks. He realized a Serpa had deliberately gone in the opposite direction and then jumped into the bushes. But in reality, she had climbed a tree. He said he wouldn't harm her and was only looking for Moto. She jumped down for him to catch her. Suddenly, a squirrel on the tree dropped a map. When the sniper realized a Serpa was involved with Moto, he loaded his gun. But just then, the white wolf appeared. Moto, on the other hand, was soon captured. They knew him as the immortal demon, so they were very cautious. With no other options, Moto desperately jumped into a nearby bear den. One man wanted to use smoke to suffocate Moto, but the other didn't want to waste time and shot directly into the den. A bear charged out and killed one man. While the gunshot accidentally killed the man next to him, only one man remained. After a struggle, he killed the bear but died from blood loss. Moto emerged with a bear in his hands. He wasn't sure whether to bring it back, fearing a Serpa would turn it into minced bear meat. Meanwhile, the white wolf had knocked out the remaining soldier. This wolf was larger than the normal type and kept throwing the soldier around until he lost consciousness. A Serpa stopped it before it could kill him and rubbed its belly as a reward. Shortly after, Moto returned with a bear cub in his stomach, and the wolf disappeared. A Serpa ignored the soldier and went back to the village with Moto. She discovered the bear cub. But the Ainu people didn't eat bear cubs. They would bring them back to the village to raise. The Ainu people didn't seem afraid of Moto and were actually curious about him. A Serpa lived with her grandmother, who was also the village chief. Moto conversed with her, even though he didn't understand the Ainu language. A few curious children approached him. Moto found their names odd, as they all had connections to poop. A Serpa explained that the Ainu named their children with unpleasant names to keep the demons away. A Serpa's old name was Anus, and Moto figured the demons would flee from that name. A Serpa's grandmother took care of the bear cub. A Serpa advised Moto not to get too close to the cub, as the village had a custom of returning animals to the gods. Once the bear grew, they would perform a ritual, not necessarily involving killing. The village relied on hunting, so animal gods were very important. They offered gratitude to the gods for protecting them from things beyond their control. The bear god was the most revered. A Serpa thought it was best not to get too attached to the bear cub to avoid the sadness of separation later on. Moto thought a Serpa was different from the rest of the Ainu people. Her name even meant future change. Outside, in the snow, Lieutenant Tokashiro from the 7th Division had arrived to search for the 4 missing men and Moto. Elsewhere, the elderly Toshizu had found another prisoner, Ashiyama, who was at a brothel. Toshizu planned to fight the 7th Division to recover the hides with the map tattoos and asked Ashiyama to help. The next day, a Serpa took Moto fishing. There were many sea perch, and she wanted to process them right away. But Moto had forgotten to bring a knife, so he hurried back to the village to get it. On the way back, he met Asoma, a Serpa's uncle, who warned Moto about traps he had set. The villagers didn't have a good opinion of the Japanese, but since a Serpa had brought Moto, they trusted him and were less suspicious of him. After chatting for a while, Moto returned to help a Serpa. By the afternoon, they brought the fish back for a Serpa's grandmother to cook. Later, the sea perch soup was ready. Moto slurped it up and even added miso to the dish. He invited a Serpa's grandmother to eat, but she scolded him with a stick. In the following days, Moto stayed in a Serpa's village. The children often played pranks to scare away demons. When a Serpa did it, the children were scared. But when Moto did it, they quickly ran off to play elsewhere. That night, Moto heard a long howl. He recalled how the white wolf often saved a Serpa. Osoma explained that the wolf's name was Ritar. When a Serpa and her father had gone hunting as a child, they saved the wolf, and it had always stayed with them, even after her father passed away. However, due to the wolf's proud nature, it could never be tamed. One day, it followed the call of its instincts, leaving a Serpa to grow up alone. Since then, a Serpa smiled less, but recently, she seemed happier, perhaps due to Moto's presence. A Serpa's grandmother asked Moto to take care of her, and after some thought, Moto decided to leave. He wished her well and left during the night. The next day, a Serpa was furious that Moto had left and was determined to punish him. Meanwhile, Moto returned to the brothel to ask the owner if he had any information. The owner said that a customer with a tattoo like Moto's had attacked one of his prostitutes. Moto then went to find the woman at a restaurant. While waiting, he ordered soba, and after finishing his meal, the restaurant owner led soldiers to the spot. Moto opened combat, but no matter how immortal he was, he had to surrender to the barrel of a gun. They wanted to kill him right there, but then Toki arrived, insisting that he be the one to kill Moto. Back at the station, Moto was eating sweets and chatting to avoid guilt. but Toki brought up the soldier Moto had saved by the river, repeatedly mentioning the words immortal, of course. Admitting to being the immortal demon would lead to death by bullet, so Moto continued to play dumb. Toki then made a precise argument that Moto was holding the hide with the map to the gold vault. Moto continued to pretend he didn't understand, suggesting that maybe the explosion had blown a part of Toki's brain out, causing him to lose his mind. Annoyed, Toki jabbed a candy skewer into Moto's throat. Moto was no longer enjoying himself. Toki told him that if he worked for him, he would release him. Toki needed more people spread across Hokkaido to search for the gold, which would be used to buy weapons from America, and then use that to take down the 7th Division. Afterward, he planned to take over important ports for trade routes to the mainland. Hokkaido would be his. Moto considered Toki's plans to be a stinking, time-wasting endeavor. That night, a Serpa sent Ritar to follow Moto's scent into the city. But the wolf ended up finding Shira. It turned out that during their outfit change, they had swapped socks. Upon hearing a Serpa was looking for Moto, Shira told her that he was at the 7th Division, and that once there, the only way out was during the Bon Festival. Realizing Moto was in danger, a Serpa insisted that Shira take her there. Of course, Shira didn't want to go to a death trap, so he quickly tried to escape, but Ritar caught him. Meanwhile, Moto had been tortured for an entire day. The 2 soldiers he had previously beaten arrived for revenge. When they pulled out their knives, he jumped up, fought back, and kept shouting that he was immortal. Outside, Shira led a Serpa to the 7th Division headquarters. The 2 made a plan to rescue Moto. Inside, Moto was fighting, but he was still tied up, and the 2 soldiers couldn't survive much longer if he wasn't restrained. Moto was taken to a separate room. Outside, Shira found Moto's location. He made a deal with a Serpa. He would help her if they split the gold. A Serpa didn't care about the gold, so she agreed. Shira started tying a rope from the iron bars to a horse outside. A Serpa was to wait for the signal to urge the horse to break through the door. The plan was set. Shira used grease to lubricate the inside to help save Moto. However, the horses outside grew frightened as they sensed Ritar. The 2 soldiers returned to kill Moto. One stood guard while the other worked, but that was the last time the guard saw his comrade. As the door closed, Moto broke free from his bindings and killed the soldier. When Toki arrived, Moto was barely alive, not letting him die easily. Toki ordered his men to take him to the hospital. He needed to find the hide before Moto died. When Moto left, Toki stayed behind to inspect the body. It was strange. The wounds didn't look like battle wounds. When he removed the shirt, he discovered that Moto had stolen the soldier's organs to fake the injuries. Meanwhile, Moto revived, taking down one soldier after another. Toki grabbed a horse and chased after him. A Serpa shot Toki's horse, but even without the horse, Toki kept his speed. He chose not to shoot Moto, and the arrow aimed at the horse was avoided by a Serpa to prevent Toki from tracking them. Returning to the headquarters, it was set on fire. Toki wasn't worried because he had already covered himself with the hide. Moto returned to meet a Serpa. She used her family staff to punish him first. Later, Shira gathered everyone and reported that he couldn't get the hide. Putting that aside, he was quite hungry and planned to cook the horse. Taking the horse with them would make them too conspicuous, so they decided to eat it. He would make sukiyaki, a popular dish at the time. Shira went to find eggs so that a Serpa and Moto could handle the meat. He felt a bit awkward because if anything happened to her, he wouldn't know how to explain it to the people in the village. A Serpa threw a piece of meat at Moto's face so he could use it to treat his wound. Choosing to go with him was her decision, and she didn't like being seen as a child who would hinder others. That night, after gathering all the ingredients, the sukiyaki was ready. When the meat was cooked, all they had to do was dip it in egg and eat. A Serpa discovered something strange in her portion. It looked like feces. Moto kept explaining repeatedly that it wasn't feces, but miso, which made the dish taste better. The Serpa reluctantly tried it and was surprised at how delicious it was. Meanwhile, Toshi went to meet a bandit to discuss a potential alliance. When the negotiations failed, conflict broke out between the two sides, and Toshi easily defeated the bandits. Despite his age, Toshi was still very brave. The next day, Shira went to town alone to gather information. Moto and Asurpa decided to lay low for a while. The two went hunting for deer. But after a while, Moto started to feel tired and thirsty. Asurpa found a vine with a lot of water inside. She drank first, but drank too much. Moto struggled but managed to drink some as well. Asurpa then made a tool for Moto to walk on the snow, and they ventured deeper into the mountains, where they found signs of a deer marking its territory. Asurpa used her family's heirloom to hit the tree and lure the deer out. Sure enough, it appeared, but in the rush, Moto missed and shot the deer in the rear. They quickly chased after it, but unexpectedly, Asurpa noticed the tracks of a dog and two people. One of them had a limp. It turned out the soldier Asurpa had left behind was still alive, and he was with Hokkaido's best bear hunter, Nihei, who had just killed a bear with a single bullet. They learned that the soldier's name was Tanigaki. Nihei had already hunted 20 bears, and his goal was to hunt the ancient wolf. Following the trail, Asurpa and Moto found the deer hiding under a tree. Asurpa would lure it out while Moto would ambush it. But since he wasn't good with a bow, he let the deer escape. That night, Moto sat at a corner, disappointed in himself. The next day, they continued tracking the deer. Asurpa noticed the uneven tracks and realized the deer was weakening due to its injuries. Once they located the deer, this time Moto moved slowly to a position where he could easily aim. Asurpa lured the deer out, but just as it charged, Moto hesitated and missed. Memories from the battlefield flashed in his mind, making him falter. Fortunately, Ritar rushed in and caught the deer. Though injured, the deer still charged toward Moto with determined eyes. Much like himself in battle, willing to charge to the end even if it meant death. Asurpa opened the deer's stomach and put Moto's hands inside to warm them. She explained that, like any living creature, when it dies, its meat would help him survive and nourish the earth. Its life not wasted. As they began preparing the deer, Ritar sensed someone approaching and urged Asurpa to leave. They quickly took what they needed and left. Just as Nihei and Gaki arrived, the skilled hunter easily identified the tracks left by Asurpa, Moto, and the wolf. The two began planning to hunt the wolf. Moto and Asurpa returned to their shelter and found that Shira had come back. He even brought some alcohol for a celebration. Regarding the information Shira gathered from a fur merchant, he revealed that a man caught last year for 3 murders had recently appeared in Otaru. The man was a skilled hunter named Nihei. Meanwhile, Gaki had also seen Nihei's tattoo, but was now torn between 2 choices: to kill him and return to the military or to hunt the wolf with him. Gaki came from a well-known hunter family, and for some reason, he chose to stay with the military. However, the blood of a hunter still ran through him, and he was determined to bring back the wolf's pelt. Asurpa knew about Nihei, and that he had an Ainu dog with him. Shira overheard from traders that they were willing to buy a white wolf pelt for a high price. Asurpa immediately realized that Ritar was in danger. However, it was hard to go out there without proper visibility, so they decided to wait until morning. Meanwhile, Gaki and Nihei returned to the spot where the deer's body had been, hoping to see the wolf again. Unfortunately, by morning, all they found were wolf droppings, suggesting that the wolf had been watching them the entire time. Gaki came up with an idea and began stripping off his clothes to attract the wolf's attention. Meanwhile, Nihei had been hiding in the forest, waiting to shoot. Soon, Ritar appeared. If it revealed its head, it would become just another extinct species. But when it did show itself, an arrow was shot, causing Ritar to flee, and Nihei missed his shot as well. Shira and Moto reached the old hunter's location, and Moto was ready to shoot him if he tried to move. The golden dog appeared, chewing on Moto's gun, but Moto quickly used a knife to cut off some of Nihei's fingers. The old man retaliated by swinging his gun at Moto's face. Moto stalled for time to allow Shira to retrieve the gun from the golden dog. However, just as they got the gun back, Gaki took Asurpa hostage. Moto, not wanting her to witness violence, told Shira to lower the gun. Nihei then bound both of them and told Gaki to take Asurpa away so that he could deal with them. But as they turned to leave, Moto and Shira managed to escape. Moto, a master at escaping, now had to figure out how to rescue Asurpa. Gaki had taken Asurpa out of the forest, but unfortunately for him, he stepped into a trap and was wounded, leaving him with only one functioning leg. If he didn't get medical attention soon, he would die from the injury. Asirpa used a knife to cut away the infected flesh. Soon after, the old hunter appeared again. Knowing Asirpa had a close connection with the wolf, he used her as bait to lure the creature in. The wolves were long believed to be extinct in these mountains, but what he wanted wasn't a few coins, it was the pelt of the last wolf alive here. The old hunter tied Asirpa to a tree, and indeed, the wolf appeared. It charged in a zigzag pattern, making it hard to aim. Instantly, the wolf bit into the hunter's hand, but he managed to point the gun at its throat. However, another wolf appeared from behind and bit into the old hunter's neck. It turned out that the two wolves were a pair, and they had a pack of pups. Moto and Shira rushed in to rescue Asirpa, and the golden dog, along with Gaki, managed to escort the old hunter a little farther before he died. The old man, without regrets, closed his eyes. Shira and Asirpa took Gaki back to the village, while Moto stayed behind to skin the old hunter. Upon returning to the village, they handed Gaki over to the village elder for care. While they prepared a feast of stewed deer meat, Asirpa didn't want to be blunt, but she suggested Moto eat the feces. Asirpa's mother brought fresh salmon for the three of them and explained that the fish had been gifted by the gods. However, recently, the gods had become angry because the Ainu people had polluted the river while panning for gold. When life grew difficult, the entire Ainu tribe held a meeting and stopped panning for gold, hiding their gold so no one would fight over it. The people who knew its location grew old and died, leaving only one elder who knew where it was hidden. But he was killed by a Naparbo. Shira thought he had heard wrong, as he only heard the gold was worth 20 can. Gaki revealed that the amount was much more than that. Toki had deduced that Naparbo wanted to make sure only the right person could find the gold, so he spread false information. Anyone could carry 20 can, but the actual amount could be up to 20,000 can. Shira had also heard that Toki planned a coup. With that much gold, he could defeat the 7th Division in Asahikawa. Moto guessed that it was related to the battle at Arthur Port. In that battle, Toki and his team won, but the losses were more than half. The chief of staff, obsessed with direct attacks for glory, had committed suicide in regret over the losses. The government blamed the entire unit for it. They received no money or medals and were abandoned by the army. Toki decided to build a dictatorial monarchy and seize Hokkaido. He planned to build arms factories and sell weapons abroad, and to do this, he needed money. After hearing this, Moto was determined not to stop. Toki had gone too far, even killing his own men, partly because of his friend's wife. The next day, Ushi and Toshi went out to patrol. Ushi separated from the group to visit a brothel and happened to meet Shira, who was gathering information. Ushi quickly ran away. Like a mad bull, Ushi charged ahead, unstoppable, while Shira did everything he could to avoid him. But Ushi kept charging, knocking down both man and horse. Shira ran into some soldiers from the 7th Division and reported that Ushi had a tattoo. The soldiers took defensive positions, but Ushi charged straight into them, grabbing Shira and spinning him around. Suddenly, there was an explosion from underground. Ushi's team arrived to take him away. While Shira and other parts of the city were hit with bombs, the 7th Division managed to capture one soldier, but let Ushi escape. Toki checked and found that there were no tattoos. He immediately realized they had been deceived. His true target was the bank. The old samurai entered with his companions to rob the bank, and Toshi had discovered what the old man needed. Toki rushed to the scene. According to the bank's report, a large sum of money, bonds, artwork, and a katana had been stolen. Toki immediately realized that Toshi was involved. But it was too late. Toshi had already stolen Toki's horse and fled. Shira, narrowly escaping death, headed to the brothel to gather information. He struck a deal with one of the courtesans there. Whenever the man with the tattoo arrived, she would take his belongings and exchange them with Shira. Once Shira had what he needed, he returned to ask Asirpa for Ratara's help. She refused, not wanting to put him or his family in danger. Moto had caught a bobcat, which played dead and then leapt to bite Shira's head to escape. Fortunately, the golden dog caught it. To prove he wasn't useless, Shira asked the golden dog to track Ushi's scent, and soon they found him. Shira overheard that a body had been discovered near the coast, likely caused by a man named Henmi. who seemed to be in cahoots with Ushi. Suddenly, the golden dog made a noise, alerting Ushi, who quickly knocked Shira out. That night, Toshi returned and gave Shira two options: follow him or die. He tasked Shira with bringing back Henmi's skin. Of course, Shira had no choice but to comply. When Shira returned, he told Moto and Asurpa about Henmi. He was certain that the victim's body, which had target carved on it, was his doing. Shira explained that Henmi was a sadistic killer who enjoyed his work. Moto remembered that he and Asurpa had seen a similar body earlier that morning. Also marked with the word target, the three of them decided to find Henmi, heading toward the coast where recent victims had been fishermen, and Asurpa was also craving whale meat. When they arrived, they saw many herring fishing boats off the coast. Henmi might be hiding among the workers. They met Osoma, who hurriedly took them out to sea. Asurpa noticed a boat had caught a whale but couldn't handle it alone, so they needed assistance. The whale was huge, but Moto skillfully threw a harpoon into it, and it began pulling the boat, dragging them toward the herring fishing boats. The impact caused one crew member to fall into the water, and Moto stayed behind to save him, sending Shira to hunt the whale. Good news: Moto saved the man, but bad news: the man was Henmi. Moto told him to strip and warm up, but Henmi feared his tattoo would be exposed, so Moto covered him with a scarf. Henmi, smelling blood on Moto, realized that Moto, like him, enjoyed killing. After warming up, Henmi returned to his room to change, but one person saw his tattoo and Henmi killed him. Just as Henmi was about to strangle Moto, Moto came to him, asking to stay for a few days to search for the murderer. Henmi led Asurpa and Moto to see the work being done, then invited them both to stay for a meal as thanks for saving him. They were served rice with fish. Asurpa suddenly excused herself to use the bathroom, and Henmi asked Moto about the feeling of killing. Knowing that Moto was a soldier, Moto explained that he could never forget those he had killed, but he felt no guilt because he had reasons for his action. However, Moto was certain that when he died, he wouldn't be able to rest peacefully. The sadistic killer, excited by Moto's words, wanted to kill him. In the bathroom, Asurpa discovered the body Henmi had killed. She rushed to find Moto, but he was already gone. Henmi wanted to lead Moto to a secluded place to kill him, but suddenly, soldiers from the 7th Division arrived. Seeing this, Henmi led Moto to a villa on the mountain. Coincidentally, Toki was there, meeting with a wealthy investor to fund a weapons factory. This wealthy man shared Toki's passion for guns and boasted about a new acquisition. Outside, Asurpa rushed to the villa, but instead of looking for Moto, she headed straight for the bathroom. Meanwhile, Henmi led Moto to the attic, but two soldiers were searching the area. When they spotted Moto, they charged at him. Henmi killed one soldier and stabbed the other in the head. As Henmi reveled in the killings, the remaining soldier fired at him. Henmi fell down the stairs, and hearing the gunshot, Toki arrived on the scene. The wealthy investor, thinking there was a thief, started firing indiscriminately, which allowed Moto to escape with Henmi. He dragged the serial killer to the beach to meet Shira, who immediately pointed out Henmi. Luckily, Asurpa had returned from the restroom just in time to help Moto. Moto managed to stab Henmi twice, but rather than being afraid, Henmi seemed more satisfied, even saluting. With the 7th Division closing in, Moto needed to finish things quickly. After all, this would be their last encounter. Moto decided to indulge Henmi for one final time. They exchanged brutal blows, and Moto ended it with a knife to the heart. He promised to remember Henmi, even if he were to skin him. Unfortunately, just as Moto was about to leave, an orca whale appeared and devoured Henmi. Moto, Shira, and Asurpa quickly boarded a boat to chase after the whale. Toki also pursued closely behind. The whale seemed to be playing with its prey before consuming it, but Moto dove into the water, stripped off his clothes, and retrieved Henmi's body. Asurpa threw a harpoon into the orca, and it began dragging everyone away, allowing them to escape from Toki. Back on shore, Toki was briefed on the escape of Ogata, whom Moto had attacked, and the disappearance of Nikedu. Meanwhile, Gaki, who had been out gathering firewood, encountered Ogata and Nikedu. They used Asurpa's grandmother to extract information, but when they failed to get anything useful, they left, realizing he couldn't stay there any longer. Gaki asked his grandmother for permission to leave. Just then, a boy from the village knocked Gaki down, helping him escape with his life. It turned out Ogata had no intention of letting Gaki go. They knew Gaki would report their betrayal to Toki, so it was better to deal with him now. Gaki had no choice but to fight. But he was up against one of the deadliest marksmen. As soon as he took out his binoculars, he was shot at. Gaki scattered smoke to obscure visibility, and the boy retrieved the gun Asurpa had hidden. Gaki recognized it as the gun of Old Hawk, with only one bullet left. But since it had killed the bear before, Gaki felt confident. Meanwhile, after Moto skinned Henmi, the group took a rest at an inn. An old man appeared and wanted to carry Asurpa. He found her familiar and asked her Japanese name, but Moto didn't know. He promised to ask her next time. Shira, who was drunk, had to sober up because the old man was Toshi. Toshi reminded Moto to quickly copy the map and hand it over before leaving. Gaki began running up the mountain, but with his injured leg, he couldn't keep the distance for long. He then stepped in the bear's tracks to erase his trail. Their cat and mouse chase continued until nightfall. When Gaki found the carcass of a deer that the bear had hidden, the weather grew cold, and lighting a fire to warm up would only reveal his location. Ogata and Nikedu waited until morning, and when they noticed smoke, they arrived to find only a pile of firewood and the deer carcass. Ogata sent Nikedu to scout while he stayed back to cover him. Trusting Ogata, Nikedu did as instructed and approached the fire. Seeing no one around, Nikedu began warming up and even started to cook some meat. Suddenly, the bear appeared and bit off Nikedu's ear. He called out to Ogata, but Ogata couldn't shoot without revealing his position. Thinking Gaki didn't have a gun, Ogata shot the bear, but in doing so, he exposed himself. The bear had been a distraction, and a bullet struck Ogata in the chest. With Ogata down, Gaki successfully captured the two men. Suddenly, a soldier from Toki's unit arrived. He explained that he had been tracking Ogata and Nikedu for several days. Waiting for orders from Toki, he mentioned that Toki was on his way. As soon as the soldier finished speaking, he was shot dead. Ogata, however, was still alive. Unfortunately, the bullet that killed the bear hadn't been enough to finish him off. Ogata managed to shoot and retreat, only wounding his opponents to slow them down while escaping. Nikedu was captured and interrogated for information on the other traitors. Toki, amused, asked for Nikedu's ear, but Nikedu refused to cooperate. Toki told him that if he wanted revenge on Moto, he could point out the other traitors. Reluctantly, Nikedu gave up their names. Ogata successfully escaped. Gaki left after the encounter, and now Moto's group had obtained 5 tattoos. Moto planned to find Toshi first, suspecting that Toshi had some of the skins they needed. Shira revealed that Toshi was considered immortal and rumored to consume whale meat to stay alive. Setting that aside, Shira pointed out a snow-covered flower that could be seen as a sign of spring, a season that made Asurpa crave Edo fish, which only appeared during the spring. The Ainu people build dams to catch fish, but they must be careful, as some Edo fish can grow large enough to eat an entire bear. As Shira spoke, she suddenly fell into the river. Moto wanted to save her, but when he saw the fish, which was even bigger than Shira, all he could do was pray. An Ainu man, Kairo, who was a friend of Asurpa's father, jumped into the water to rescue Shira. Afterward, they all worked together to handle the fish. They roasted it and enjoyed the meal, and Asurpa offered Moto a taste of the fish's eyes. While Moto was eating, Kairo brought up Moto's nickname, the Immortal. He explained that he had heard of it when he was in the military. Kairo didn't work for Toki and didn't know Moto personally. Kairo also mentioned that an old man had come to the village looking for Asurpa, and he had addressed her as Asuko in Japanese. Asurpa was shocked because only her parents knew that name. Kairo explained that this had happened at a Bashiri prison. Naparabo had given a hint to the prisoners on how to contact his friends outside, mentioning Kachao Basuko in Ataru. Naparabo was trying to pass his gold to Asurpa. In other words, Naparabo was Asurpa's father. Asurpa couldn't believe that her father had killed her people to steal gold. Kairo added that he had traveled to Japan with Asurpa's father, and Naparabo wasn't originally Ainu from Japan. Asurpa still couldn't believe it, and she wanted to meet Naparabo. If he truly was her father, he had to reveal everything. However, Shira warned her that meeting him wouldn't be easy. Naparabo had escaped from many prisons in Japan, and Obashiri was one of the toughest. There would be no way to meet him without Shira's help. Moto, meanwhile, told Kairo that Shira was one of the prisoners. Kairo looked at the tattoo and asked if Moto had any more skins. Moto kept this information to himself. Eventually, Kairo decided to join Moto's group. He would take responsibility for returning the remaining gold to the Ainu people as Naparabo's fellow countrymen. The group returned to the village and met with Gaki. They discussed the next stage of their journey to Obashiri, making sure to avoid Asachikawa, which was the headquarters of the 7th Division. Kairo suggested taking a route through Sapporo, where he knew a weapons dealer who wouldn't be tracked. They agreed on the plan and decided to rest for the night. Shira, however, had doubts about Kairo's trustworthiness. But Moto didn't trust Shira either. However, since Asurpa trusted him, so did the others. The next day, they set off, with Shira having to ride a small horse without complaining. Not long after, they arrived in Sapporo, where they obtained guns and ammunition. Shira, looking for some entertainment, asked the owner of the place about the local area. The owner mentioned a hotel nearby where the owner, a beautiful woman named Kano, had met Ushi. Kano would recognize him. But luckily, Ushi's attention seemed to be focused elsewhere. When they entered his room, Ushi immediately tried to take her. But just then, Moto and the group arrived, and Kano set up a meeting with him for the evening. Shira, distracted by Ushi's gaze, failed to recognize her. The hotel was like a maze, old and renovated many times. When they were about to enter the room, Kano started observing Ushi, ignoring Shira and focusing on Ushi's perfect body and Asurpa's beautiful eyes. Shira left to find Kano, but Kano kept appearing and disappearing, eventually leading Shira into Ushi's room. Ushi still didn't notice him. Just as Shira was about to be discovered, Kano used a trap to take Shira away. Moto heard something, and Asurpa explained that it was just her stomach growling, so they all decided to go eat. They happened to run into Ushi, but didn't recognize each other. Moto knew Ushi practiced judo by the peculiar shape of his ears. The two exchanged moves, and Ushi, intrigued by Moto, invited him to drink. Meanwhile, Shira ended up in a room where Kano dealt with dead bodies and discovered the truth. However, Kano was waiting behind him. At the restaurant, Asurpa was invited to eat something, which turned out to be curry. And despite the strange appearance, it was delicious. After a few beers, everyone began to get drunk. Ushi ended the drinking session because someone was waiting for him at the hotel. When he returned, Kano was nowhere to be found. But he noticed the hole he had made earlier and became suspicious. Ushi accidentally triggered a trap and was taken to where Shira was tied up. Shira tried to warn him about Kano, but Ushi mistook Shira for Kano and tried to assault her. Shira suddenly remembered that Kano was the old prisoner with a mole on his lip from her time in prison. At this point, Ushi, now drunk, only had one thing on his mind: getting to the innkeeper. Shira saw the situation was hopeless, so he quickly ran away. Meanwhile, Kano, who was plotting to take Asurpa's eye, snuck towards Moto's room. Moto woke up just in time to punch Kano in the face, but Kano denied it. Moto wondered how he had gotten in since he had locked the door. Shira, from outside, called out to warn Moto that Kano was a mad doctor who kidnapped patients and experimented on them. When Kano's true identity as the doctor was revealed, he threw a needle at Asurpa's heart, but Moto took the blow instead, giving Kano a chance to escape. Moto, worried, quickly rushed to wake Kairo, but Kairo was dead to the world, asleep like a log. The doctor reappeared, attempting to capture Shira, who fled, throwing bombs in his path. To everyone's surprise, Ushi arrived and started fighting the doctor. While running, Moto stopped in front of them. With no other choice, the doctor revealed that Ushi also had a tattoo. This caused the two beasts to turn on each other, and despite Ushi's larger build, Moto was overpowered and thrown around like a rag doll. Luckily, Moto managed to escape thanks to a trap. As for the doctor, he decided to abandon everything. However, Shira, still furious, tracked him down and continued throwing bombs at him. Moto fell into a pit filled with organs, surrounded by alcohol, which soon started to catch fire. Meanwhile, Shira encountered Ushi, who delivered a message from Toshi to Shira, warning him to always report his position to Toshi and not to joke around with him. Shira acknowledged the message and quickly set off to find the bomb bag. The good news was that he found it, but the bad news was that it fell right into the pit where Moto had fallen. Shira rushed to pull everyone out before the hole exploded. The next day, Shira met with Oshi to hand over the copied map. He also learned that the doctor, Kano, had survived the explosion and had some important information. Afterward, Shira returned to Moto's group. They now needed money to buy more explosives, so they decided to hunt for some and stay in a nearby Ainu village. In the Naganuma forest, a Serpa trapped a fox using a trap made from 3 long nails driven into an old oil barrel. When the fox licked the oil, it got stuck. Although they couldn't sell the fur for much, it was still worth something. Cairo, however, pointed out that Shira had spent all their money on gambling, and he was punished for it. They then reached a nearby village, where the village elder was one of Asurpa's father's 6 brothers. He was happy to welcome guests and mentioned a strange woman who had recently arrived in the village. She was a fortune teller causing a stir in the village. As they spoke, the fortune teller, Karma, appeared. Shira, always fond of beautiful women, cheered up at the sight of her. Karma decided to read their fortunes and predicted that the thing they were all searching for would never come to fruition. Karma advised them to give up. Asurpa, being a modern Ainu, didn't believe in fortune telling. But Karma, who had a knack for predicting the future, made it clear that whether or not Asurpa believed in her was her choice. Before leaving, Karma also predicted that Asurpa was looking for her father. That night, it seemed the group still wasn't convinced about Karma. But Shira, not knowing whether Karma truly believed, took her to a horse racing track the next day and asked her to predict the winner of the race. She agreed, with the condition that Shira had to buy something from her. Karma correctly predicted the winner of every race, and soon enough, Shira started making money. When Moto's group found him, he acted much more confident, paying them off generously, though Asurpa still scolded him for his superstition. Cairo, who had been around horses since he was young, noticed some horses with higher chances of winning, and as they toured the racetrack, he was mistaken for a jockey. Since one of their jockeys had escaped, they needed a replacement. At the stables, Cairo realized the horse he was supposed to ride was destined to lose. It had been made slow by being overhydrated. Meanwhile, the horse that was set to win had been drugged. Cairo then returned to Moto's group and informed them that the horse he would ride, number 3, would win, and they should bet on it. Shira asked Karma to predict again, and she told him that number 3 would lose and number 6 would win. It turned out the odds were being controlled by a Yakuza group. Shira, believing in Karma's prediction, went ahead and placed his bet. Moto, seeing what Shira was doing, locked him up. But Shira still managed to have Karma place the bet on number 6. Shira believed that they needed money urgently, and gambling was the only way they could achieve that. Asurpa chased after Karma, but she had already placed all her bets. Karma only complimented Asurpa on having eyes like her father's before leaving. The horse race began, and Cairo was immediately sabotaged. Despite this, he skillfully maneuvered his horse and passed everyone, easily winning. The horse race itself wasn't much, and the story didn't cut anything out. After losing all their money in the bets, Shira became like a drugged fool. However, Asurpa's group still managed to win because, among the bets, Karma had placed one on horse number 3. Cairo suggested they leave the area quickly, as the Yakuza would likely hunt them down after such a big loss. However, they didn't need to worry, as Toshi had already dealt with the matter. Inside, Toshi found the hide, but encountered Oga, who had come to join Toshi's side. That afternoon, Shira came to his senses and rejoined Moto's group. Though still a bit out of it, he had important information, for Moto Kano had revealed the location of the next hide, which was in a house in Yuyubari. They were unsure whether their plan to reach Abashiri would succeed, so they would prioritize finding the hide while traveling to the prison. As there was information about it along the way, they then set off to Yuyubari. Winter quietly passed, leaving behind cold winds and a gray melancholy, making way for spring, with its gentle breath, warm sunlight, and buds bursting with life. In Yuyubari, Toki visited a taxidermy shop. He came here to find a few things to decorate the 7th Division, and the works here were made with great precision. The craftsman, Edogai, used fresh corpses to ensure the authenticity of his creations. Toki admired the works and praised Edogai. Besides shopping, he was here to return a pair of gloves Edogai had dropped in the cemetery. Edogai began to feel uneasy. Outside, Nikidu was with a marksman. Taking aim, there had been rumors about a coal miner who had died in an accident. A man with strange tattoos. Toki and his companion had exhumed the body, but it was empty. The atmosphere here was cold and dry, causing the body not to decompose when buried, making Yunari a great source for fresh corpses. Toki deduced that Edogai often robbed graves for fresh bodies. Toki wasn't here to arrest Edogai. In fact, he found his work impressive and asked for another pair of gloves. Edogai explained that the gloves weren't made from human skin, but from pig leather. His visits to the cemetery were only to bury his defective works. He then went to retrieve the other glove for Toki. While Edogai rambled on, Toki checked around and discovered a pile of human-shaped taxidermy. Edogai had dressed up to confront Toki. His mother constantly urged him to kill Toki, but Edogai was having a mental battle, conflicted between his talent being recognized and his mother's demands. He began arguing with her in his mind until he lost control. Toki had to show him a coat made from human skin, which calmed Edogai down. Edogai's mother still insisted that he kill Toki, so they both went outside for Edogai to examine the situation more closely. He even encouraged Toki to use some herbs so his skin wouldn't itch while wearing it. Toki then wanted to see Edogai's works made from human skin. Each piece was bizarre. The marksman outside looked in, mesmerized. Meanwhile, Nikidu had gone to meet Edogai's mother and accidentally dropped his ear onto her. He hurried to find it. Just as Edogai entered the room, Toki handed Edogai a gun and told him to shoot his mother, saying it was the only way he could be free and mature. After the shot, Edogai no longer heard his mother's voice. Toki made a deal with Edogai. He wanted Edogai to create hides with fake codes known only to his division. Toki intended to bring chaos to the war. In Otaru, Oshi took care of Kano. Currently, Toshi had 6 hides in total, and it became clear that Toshi's goal was to restore the Izo Republic. They discussed the intentions of Naparabo. If he was Ainu, why would he harm his own people just to seize gold? Toshi speculated that Naparabo might be a partisan from the Russian Far East. Posing as an Ainu, Russia was a fragmented country at the time, which meant Naparabo was likely a guerrilla commander trying to make money to fund the war for independence. He had planned to smuggle the money out through Sakhalin, but failed, leading to all the events that had unfolded. Toshi still didn't fully trust Naparabo, and his ally might be a guerrilla posing as an Ainu. Back with Moto's group, their daily routine consisted of moving, eating, and sleeping. Asurpa often had dreams about her father, who would tell her stories about her mother, describing her as a very beautiful woman. Asurpa had both her father's blood and her mother's Ainu blood. She believed she would be a modern Ainu and lead the Ainu people here. During one of these beautiful dreams, Asurpa was woken up by Shira's snoring, which made her irritated. Edogai was still struggling to come up with a perfect idea for making fake hides. Meanwhile, in Otaru, Gaki and Osoma went to buy guns. On their way back, they encountered a deer and decided to test the gun. When a tree branch snapped, the deer got startled, but Gaki managed to shoot it in the thigh, preventing it from running away. Gaki asked about a boy hiding nearby, and Osoma explained that the boy was very introverted, didn't like to play with others in the village, but loved hunting. He resembled Osoma when he was younger, so he called the boy over to see. After handling the deer, they returned to the village and met Karma. Gaki didn't believe in fortune-telling, but Karma expressed condolences for Gaki's recently deceased sibling, which shocked him. Karma said she came looking for Asurpa. She then met with the village elder and shared that one of the 3 people traveling with Asurpa was a traitor. If they didn't stop them, Asurpa's life would be in danger. Seeing the concern in everyone's faces, Gaki made a decision. The next day, he set off. But the boy he thought was a boy turned out to be a girl. She had knitted him a glove, and in Ainu tradition, if a girl knits gloves for a boy, it signifies deep affection. Asurpa's mother had blessed him, and Karma accompanied him to guide the way. Before that, Karma had met with Toki. and the two of them had discussed something. After 7 trials, Edagai finally succeeded in making 6 perfect samples of fake hides. He was about to deliver them to Toki when one of the 2 soldiers guarding Edagai was shot dead. Oga had arrived, and Edagai quickly fled with the hides. The other soldier, who had gone to buy supplies, realized he forgot his money and returned to get it. He was unintentionally discovered by Moto and Shira, who were gathering information nearby. Unable to reach a Serpa and Cairo in time, they decided to chase the soldier on their own. On the way back, the soldier overheard an old man talking about a white bear appearing. Oga barged in searching for Edagai. It was clear that Edagai admired Toki so much that he even created taxidermy in his image. He had even found several samples for making fake hides. Just then, the soldier returned. It was apparent that the soldiers of the 7th Division were formidable, only losing when ambushed, not in a direct confrontation. Oga was forced to hide among the stuffed animals after a few shots were fired. The soldier went to find Edagai, and upon learning that he had escaped, he left to search for the white bear the old man had spoken of. Edagai was running for his life. Oga was about to pursue when he encountered Shira and Moto, who had just arrived. They checked the area and found the body of a soldier. Shira was then captured by Oga, who gave Shira a clue and let Moto see it. The two of them then chased after the soldier. Oga eventually caught up to Edagai in a mine, but the soldier used a mining cart to pull Edagai away. Moto, Shira, and Oga immediately chased after them. They all entered the mine, determined not to let the hides escape, as it would cause chaos if they were leaked. Moto and Shira caught up with Edagai, and during the scuffle, Moto hit a switch that caused them to be separated from Edagai. Oga seized the opportunity to chase after Edagai. They passed by a group of miners who were setting up explosives, and Oga narrowly passed by while Edagai barely made it before the explosion occurred. But the explosion caused gas to leak out, and when it caught fire, the entire mine exploded. Everyone was trapped inside, and the gas started spreading. Edagai was pinned under a pile of rocks, seemingly dead. Unable to meet Toki and kiss his feet, Edagai handed over the hides to the soldier, instructing him to deliver them to Toki. The only way to stop the fire from spreading was to block the airflow. If the soldier didn't hurry, they would seal all the exits. Meanwhile, Shira had passed out. The gas began to thicken, and Moto struggled to drag Shira along. It was too late. As the miners had blocked all the exits, Moto tried desperately to break through the wooden barricades, but to no avail. Just as they were about to perish, Ushi appeared to save them. He easily pulled both of them out of the mine. Oga also escaped shortly after, and then dragged everyone to see the fake hides Edagai had made. Toshi arrived shortly after and found a piece of hide left behind, unsure if it was real or fake. Shira then informed Moto that the old man was the legendary samurai, Toshiju. Now, he wanted to know if Naparabo was truly Ainu or not. Before answering that question, Toshi wanted to know whether Moto intended to cooperate or oppose him. One of Toshi's allies stepped forward and suggested buying the hide for a sum of gold, which would allow Moto to marry and live a comfortable life. However, Moto didn't need the money right now. What he sought was a chance to meet Naparabo and find the answer. Just then, a Serpa's stomach growled loudly. Breaking the tension, Kona entered and offered to cook a meal, suggesting they discuss things while eating. The scene resembled something out of a painting. For now, their priority was to find a way to distinguish between the real and fake hides. Meanwhile, in Odaru, the surviving soldier returned and handed over the hides to Toki. He passed on Edagai's final message: "Let me kiss your feet," although Edagai had actually only said one word, iron. Of course, with Toki's sharp mind, he quickly realized this was the key to distinguishing the real from the fake. The next day, everyone split up to search for clues around the city. At Edagai's house, only Toshi, Oga, and Kona remained. Suddenly, they were set on fire from outside. The Nikadu team had surrounded the house to destroy the evidence, with iron bars on the windows. Running out the front door was like presenting themselves as targets. Oga rushed to the second floor, while Toshi stayed at ground level. Oga fired wildly down from above, while Toshi continuously shot outside. Any soldier who dared to step into the open was shot by Oga. When Toshi ran out of bullets, Nikadu's team stormed in. He sent one soldier to search for Oga, while he dealt with Toshi. Oga managed to sneak attack one soldier. But the soldier was too strong and fought back. Overpowering Oga, Kona tried to find an escape route. And just as Moto's group returned, he quickly rushed upstairs to rescue Oga. Nikidu, now on top of Toshi, was distracted by the noise from Moto and looked away. Toshi quickly severed one of Nikidu's legs, reloaded, and almost finished him off. But Nikidu managed to escape. The fire spread quickly, forcing everyone to retreat. They decided to split into two groups and flee, planning to meet at Ashibsu. This was a temporary alliance between the two sides. The next day, Moto's group, consisting of him, Asurpa, Ushi, and Oga, were in the woods when Asurpa spotted a few woodpeckers. During this season, their meat was very tender. Oga planned to shoot one, but Asurpa stopped him. If they shot one, the other would fly away. They decided to set a trap based on its behavior, but only caught two, which frustrated Asurpa. Oga returned with 3 birds he had shot to prove Asurpa wrong. Asurpa began preparing the meat, reserving the fresh brain for Ushi. He found it a bit gross, but seeing Moto eat it, he decided to give it a try. The group enjoyed a meal of chopped woodpecker meat together, and despite their differences, they worked well as a team. Meanwhile, Gaki was in Batero searching for Asurpa's whereabouts. The young boy, who had followed him earlier, insisted on continuing the journey with Gaki. Despite his protests, back with Toshi, they still didn't know how to distinguish the real hides from the fake ones. Their only hope was to confront Naparabo directly in prison and ask him. Relying on the one person they trusted, Shira went to relieve himself, and by chance, he ran into Moto. The two spoke privately, and Moto realized that Shira had been working for Toshi since the moment he arrived at the inn. Moto grew suspicious and started stabbing Shira with a knife, which scared him. However, this was just a nightmare that Shira was having. He decided to flee before Moto could kill him. As he rushed outside, he encountered the 7th Division, and despite trying to escape, Shira was easily caught. Toshi updated the others, informing them that Shira would likely be taken to Asahikawa. If that happened, it would cause trouble for them. It would take Shira several months to find a way out. They waited for Moto's group to arrive, and at that point, Toshi and Kairo would set out to rescue Shira. Meanwhile, in Iwamizawa, while Karma was divining, Gaki gathered information and learned of Asurpa's whereabouts. When Moto's group reunited, Toshi and Kairo prepared to leave, and Toshi figured out Kairo's true identity. During the transport, Shira noticed an old man selling green bean cakes and rushed over. It turned out to be Toshi, who gave him a signal at the bridge. At that spot, Kairo had prepared a boat. Since the bridge was small, only 10 people could cross at a time. When it was Shira's turn, Toshi appeared and cut the rope of the bridge, causing everyone to fall into the water. Kairo quickly paddled the boat towards them. Just as he was about to grab Kairo's hand, Shira, fearing the feeling of being killed by Moto, chose to let go. He preferred being captured rather than killed. Toshi returned and reported the situation, guessing that Shira was likely already in Asahikawa. No one knew how long it would take him to escape, and thinking about Shira's arrogant face, they all decided to abandon him. However, Moto said he would go save the idiot. After all, Shira still had some use, so everyone agreed. Toshi had already planned for this. In Otaru, after Nikidu returned, he had lost his mind and was constantly stealing pain-relieving opiates. It was difficult to control him. When Toki arrived, Nikidu finally settled down. Outside, there was Lieutenant Arasaki waiting for Toki. He was known for being a genius weapons inventor. The two had a good connection and talked well together. Arasaki had brought many new weapons that day. Toki also told Arasaki about the incident where his men had been attacked by a bear and lost a leg. Toki asked Arasaki to help Nikidu. A few days later, Arasaki had made a prosthetic leg for Nikidu, which could also shoot bullets from the heel. With this, Nikidu could continue his quest for revenge. Outside of Asahikawa, Moto was introduced to Suzukawa, a master of disguise and one of the prisoners. They needed to disguise themselves to investigate the location where Shira was being held. They had to disguise themselves as someone whose face was rarely seen. Toshi thought of Shirasuke, the Abashiri prison warden, a man few people knew. Shortly after, Suzukawa successfully disguised himself as a perfect replica of Shirasuke. At this point, Asurpa had fallen asleep beside Toshi, and Moto, seeing Toshi holding her, recalled the moment at the inn. He realized Shira was the traitor, but it wasn't the right time to confront it. Moto was angry, but since Asurpa had just woken up, he had to suppress his feelings. The next day, based on the number on Shira's uniform, 27 Cairo identified where Shira was being held. However, Unit 27 was under Toki's command, so it was likely that Toki would hide Shira at Colonel Yodo's camp. He was invited to meet Shirasuke. When he arrived, he saw Suzukawa and Moto in disguise. Outside, Oga was observing the situation. Without wasting time, they directly asked for Shira, since Shira's capture hadn't been made public. How could Shirasuke know about it? A subordinate of Toki then went outside to send a message to Toki. Inside, Suzukawa pulled out a stack of counterfeit money and discussed how it was made. This would be useful in the future if war broke out, and with this, he could earn merit and get promoted. Toki heard this, but since he couldn't make it in time, he called the operator to inform the other side that his men were still monitoring the real Shirasuke. If anything happened, they would know immediately. Toki's subordinate met with Suzukawa, and Ogre recognized that the man wasn't ordinary. Inside, Shira was brought in, and he quickly recognized Moto. Just then, a black soldier arrived, assigned to keep both of them in check. He began exposing Suzukawa, speaking in the local language, which only Shirasuke knew. Of course, Suzukawa could also speak it. After a moment, the black soldier shot Suzukawa dead and wounded Moto. Despite being injured, Moto dragged Shira and jumped out of the window. Oga, outside, provided cover fire. The three of them gathered and made their way to escape. They arrived at a hot air balloon test site and decided to steal it. The soldiers tried to stop them, and the black soldier quickly climbed up to chase them. Moto wanted to deal with the soldier himself, but since he was injured, he couldn't fight effectively. Asurpa, from below, fired support shots. Shira seized the opportunity, kicked the black soldier away, and managed to keep himself tethered. Shira went through a terrifying experience as he was tangled in branches, but Asurpa climbed up and joined him. Fortunately, they all managed to escape. Moto was hit by 3 bullets, so Asurpa began extracting them. Shira was surprised by how reckless Moto was, but Moto simply said he saved Shira because he still had some use. Moto also revealed that Shira had been working for Toshi, which caused Shira to panic and run away. However, Moto noticed that the tattoo replica Shira had was fake, meaning Shira hadn't actually betrayed him and Asurpa. The hot air balloon encountered some trouble, forcing them to land nearby. Since they hadn't flown very far, Division 7 could easily chase them on horseback. Asurpa used some herbs to stop Moto's bleeding, and they continued their journey. After traveling a bit further, they were caught up with again. Now, they had to cross the snowy mountain if they hoped to shake off their pursuers. The higher they went, the colder it became, and the snowstorm gradually worsened. Shira, too cold, began to lose his sanity. Asurpa decided to take a break and signaled Oga to shoot 2 deer, so they could use their hides for shelter. However, while gutting one of the deer, Shira went delirious and started running around. Asurpa quickly went after him, but before she could catch up, he returned, holding a deer. Now, Moto had to go look for Asurpa. He eventually found her by nightfall, but it was too late to return. Asurpa noticed another deer nearby, and this time Moto didn't hesitate. He shot it down, and together with Asurpa, they hid inside the deer's body. While inside, they chatted and ate. Asurpa ate the deer's liver. As she enjoyed it along with the brain, Moto preferred dried persimmons, something he hadn't had in a long time. He remembered eating them with a friend before he joined the military. If he could, he wished he could go back to his old self, not the killing machine he had become. Asurpa wanted that when everything was over, Moto would take her to his hometown so she could try dried persimmons. The next day, everyone regrouped. Oga observed that there was no sign of anyone. Shira didn't think they had given up. Perhaps they were waiting for them to descend the mountain to Abashiri. So, they decided to head straight to Takachi. They made this decision because they had previously agreed with Cairo and the others to meet in Abashiri in case they were separated. Meanwhile, Gaki had just received an email from Osoma, informing him that Asurpa's grandmother was not expected to live much longer. When an elderly Ainu person knows they are about to pass, they quietly prepare their burial cloth. Gaki didn't want his grandmother to die, so he decided they needed to find a Serpa quickly. Gaki was determined to bring a Serpa back to help her grandmother recover. She had taken care of him and other orphan children, so he needed to repay her kindness. After a long journey, Gaki learned from the local Ainu people that they had seen someone who resembled a Serpa. They went to the Kushiro swamp, where Gaki found a person dancing hip-hop. Just like a Serpa, it was indeed her, dancing to aid her digestion. Finally, they were reunited. Gaki was surprised to meet Oga there as well. Setting that aside, he told a Serpa about her grandmother's condition. Now, the modern Ainu girl had to choose between seeking answers or returning to her grandmother. And with that, the anime ended. There were still 2 more parts to go, and if you wanted to see them, the name of the anime was